over. I'd just like to remind members of the following protocols. Only speak when invited to by the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the chair. For those joining remotely, please ensure that your mics are muted when you're not speaking. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the committee or to make other comments. I will now hand over to the chair.
Thank you, Rabia. Welcome to the Corporate Committee, everybody. Thank you to members in the chamber. We have Councillor Pluvier, Councillor Ozon and Councillor Bell. I'd like to welcome our online members too. We have Councillor Young, Councillor Garcia, Councillor Root, and Councillor Susan Fajana Thomas, who is the lead cabinet member and responsible for this area in a portfolio. I'd also like to welcome Jerry McCarthy, who is the head of Community Safety Enforcement and Business Regulation. And I'd also like to welcome Josephine Sterikides, who is our senior lawyer. Okay, so on to agenda item 1. Have there been any apologies for absence?
Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Joseph, Race, Rathbone and Stops.
Thank you, Rabia. Any other apologies, committee? Okay. Agenda item 2. Do members have any interests they wish to declare? Agenda item 3. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of January 2022? Thank you, members. Can I just refer us to actions? So, Jerry McCarthy, you were going to provide an update on the out-of-hours calls service.
Thank you, Chair. I have got some information from the out-of-hours dashboard, but all I've got at the moment is the last week's data, and what I can say to you for the last week is that 89 out of 99 calls were answered by the service. The average waiting time is 55 seconds, and 66% of calls are answered within 20 seconds. And is this the type of information members are looking for? Would be my first question back on that. And if so, I can provide that going back to the period November up to the end of February for members if that's the type of information they want, or is there more information they want apart from that?
Members, is that information sufficient? It certainly seems very reassuring that residents are having their calls answered very, very quickly and not waiting on the phone for a long time. Any other concerns? I think that's fine, Jerry. Thank you for that. So the next action was in relation to the data on how Hackney Council compares to other councils in relation to the pay of senior officers. Stuart Thorne was going to update. I think he's still producing that information, so we'll have to carry that action forward to the next meeting. Paragraph 5.4, details on the number of fixed penalty notices this year compared to previous years. Jerry.
Chair, you should have received some information just from Rabia. I did circulate that and asked for that to be circulated to all members. And obviously, the main thing you will see is that the number of fixed penalty notices for this period, January to December 21, compared to the previous year, we had over an increase of sort of over 1,000 FPNs increase in the number served. So obviously, that shows that we are actually doing a lot more enforcement. And it is a variety of FPNs. Obviously, the biggest number of FPNs issued are for littering, that type of offence, followed by highway obstructions and scaffolding. And I hope all the members have the information. I'm happy to take any questions on the information I provided.
Thank you, Jerry. I didn't catch the number. I gather you said there was an increase, but I couldn't hear the number that it was increased by.
over 1,000 on the previous year.
Okay. And would you explain that as a difference because of the pandemic at all, or how would you?
I suppose part of it is down to the pandemic. Part of it is down to the fact that our enforcement team was fully staffed for most of last year, whereas in previous years we had issues with recruitment and retention. We've now resolved those issues, so obviously officers feel happier in their work. I'm saying the last year I would say only one officer has left, and that officer has left to join the Metropolitan Police. We've worked around the shifts of the enforcement officers to make them better for the officers. And as you'll be aware, Councillor, it is a very, very difficult job, especially when officers are out in the nighttime economy. They get a lot of abuse, verbal abuse, and threats from people they deal with. And I have to say the increase in the extra fixed penalty notices is testament to the actual efforts the officers have made. That's the main thing I would say. And obviously, not having reliant on agency staff or having recruitment and retention issues has helped as well. And obviously the teams are working much better than they were.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Has anybody got any comments or questions on the feedback that we've just received about the fixed penalty notices? No? And I'd just like to welcome Councillor Grace here to the Council chamber. Okay, so I think we can now thank you for that, Jerry.
Sorry, Councillor Potter, sorry. I was just, I did have my hand up because I'm a bit confused because I haven't seen this data that was apparently supplied to us. Was it included in the pack at all or not?
Councillor, no, it wasn't. I sent it to Rabia and asked for that to be forwarded on. I'm not quite sure what that happened, and I apologies if it didn't.
Okay. So I sort of, I'm a bit confused. Are we talking about fixed penalty notices for parking offences? Is that what we're talking about, or for obstructing the pavement in other ways? Is that?
It's not parking. It's for environmental enforcement, which would be for people littering, urinating, fly tipping, highway obstructions, scaffolding obstructions,
Okay.
all that type of environmental offence.
Okay.
These are mainly low-level offences, and obviously a fixed penalty notice absolves anyone of any criminality when it's paid, so that people don't end up with a criminal record as a result of what they've done.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Sorry, I was just a bit confused because we didn't have the data, so that's all. Thank you.
And just in terms of the data, can you roughly estimate when you sent it through, Jerry, and we'll check from our end as to why we didn't share that data?
I'm sure I sent it yesterday, but I'll resend it again after this meeting, then it can be shared with everyone.
Thank you for clarifying, Jerry. So unless anybody's got any other comments, we've got Councillor Ozen. Councillor Ozen? Did you get that, Jerry?
No.
So Councillor Ozen was asking, how do we deal with elderly residents who are caught short, and do we show a greater leniency?
Yes, of course we would, and obviously anyone who's issued with a fixed penalty notice can make a representation against that fixed penalty, and obviously if somebody supplies medical information, we would take that into account in making a decision on the representation. So we would be lenient, yes.
Are you satisfied with that, Councillor Ozen? Thank you. So I think we can move on to the main item on the agenda, which is the annual performance report of the Noise Service 2021. I'm going to invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the report, and then if Councillor Susan Vajana Thomas wants to follow with any comments, she is very welcome to do so.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the annual performance report in relation to noise nuisance for the period 1st of January to 31st of December 2021, and obviously provides an update on volume of noise complaints, breakdown of individual type of noise, including temporary event notices, which, as of their own, put significant demand on the service for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because I'll assume members will have read the report for themselves, but if I could move to page 18 of the agenda and just start to paragraph 4.2.4 there, 2.5, which sort of so I can set out where we are now compared to where we were in 2019. Obviously, in 2019, the enforcement team was approached to work with other services on reporting a problem, and this was to investigate the functionality of Fix My Street. And obviously, since then, we've been doing a lot of work on that system, and still ongoing today from 2019 onwards. And obviously, what we entered to have was a back-end management system for noise reports to reduce manual intervention, which has happened. Obviously, we had the cyber attack in 2020, so we then lost our historical system, Civica. So following on from that, we kept going with Fix My Street, and Hackney Procurement Board agreed to awarding a contract for 4 years to a provider for licensing of a system to deal with noise and ASB. It will deal with all the environmental health functions, licensing functions, trading standards as well. So that's just an aside from that. But in January 2020, after a period of time doing a lot of testing, NoiseWork was launched to develop a fully integrated case management system. The council has done a lot of work with Society Works, which is a registered charity, has been working with us to develop this system, and they've actually been incredibly helpful because they have actually listened to feedback from officers who tested the system and had been testing it for months. So the system went live, as I said, in January, and obviously it would benefit residents in a number of ways, including enabling officers to work more efficiently, provide better service to customers. Officers can merge cases, officers can log reports and reoccurrences directly onto NoiseWorks, which will help them as well. And obviously they can view their cases on the system as well. So this is quite a unique system, and no other council is running a system like this at the moment. So we've had to do a lot of background work to get this right before it was launched. And we are constantly making improvements to the system because we've discovered as soon as the system was launched, for example, if somebody wanted to launch a repeat call, it didn't show up on the actual cases that were ongoing that day. So work has been done to rectify that. That's just one example where it didn't work with initially. And we knew there would be glitches when the system was launched. So once the system was launched, with daily briefings with ICT for the first 2 weeks every day, 5 o'clock, just to make sure any glitches in the system were addressed and dealt with. And obviously, officers were reviewing and assigning cases, reassigning cases. And obviously, as the system has been developed, officers are still sort of picking up glitches on the system, and they're all put on a Google form, and we work with our colleagues in ICT to prioritise all the work that needs doing, and there is work that needs doing, but it's not affecting the operation of the system as it is. We just want to make it better. If I go to the top of page 20, I notice something members would be concerned about, paragraph 4.2.16. We had to undertake a privacy impact assessment, and this was agreed with the council's information management system to show that we were compliant with GDPR regulations, or we were using residents' information in accordance with these regulations, and we all know how important that is. And that actually is published on the council's website, so anyone is welcome to look at that. So I just wanted to make that clear before members sort of were concerned about how we retain information and what we do with people's information. And I know myself as a resident of another borough, that's the sort of thing that would concern me as well. So we know the noise nuisance web page requires further updates, and that's in hand at the moment. We're working at that. That should be completed hopefully by the end of the month, early April. And then everyone knows how the system works. People can log a call online, they can ring up, and obviously the calls are triaged out of hours. If the noise is still ongoing, then when the officers call the resident back, a visit will be made. If it's not, a visit will not be made. And following on from that, then obviously, as you know, we are busy with calls at weekends. We're not always able to get around to every call. And if, for example, we have a big instance such as an unlicensed music event, that will take officers away from dealing with the routine calls, and the unlicensed music event will be prioritised. and there's no guarantee the calls would be dealt with on the night, but we will let the team taking the calls know that if somebody rings up, then there is that issue. And obviously the other thing as well is the officers on duty have access to all that information on a tablet, and they're able to get back to them quicker. The feedback I have had from officers is that the system is much easier to use than what we were using previously, and officers can update stuff automatically. But obviously, what I have asked ICT to look at as well is to do some customer feedback from residents after 3 months to see what actually residents think of the service. Are they happy with it? What improvements they want to be made to the system? And we will take all that feedback on board once we've done some customer satisfaction. So I have asked specifically asked that wasn't something that wasn't on anyone's radar, and I asked specifically asked ICT if we could do that, because obviously, to me, if residents aren't happy with how the system is working, then we need to change the system. So we will do that, which in 3 months will be up to the end of April, so we'll do that early May. If I could sort of, there's various charts of noise going on from, which have go back to 2019, they're on pages 21, 22, 23 of the report. And the one thing I did want to highlight on page 25 on the paragraph 4.3 is about temporary event notices. And obviously the council can give TENs, and obviously one of the issues which we have a concern with TENs is the number of late TENs, and they've obviously year by year have increased because people apply for them lately, and they put a huge demand on the service. And Councillor Virginia Thomas and Councillor Pluvia know this very well, is that the cost of a 10 is only £21, but the administration involved in it costs far more than that, and it's a fee set by statute. And also, if we refuse a 10, then it goes to licensing subcommittee for a hearing. That's more cost involved, with officers from my service, officers from legal and governance sitting on the subcommittee, and members attending the panel, and then having to publish decisions. So it is a very complex system. It's time consuming and it's expensive, and it needs a radical overhaul. But how we go about that, we need to think about it. If I go to page 27, and we're still discussing TENs, because obviously after the pandemic, the number of TENs continued to increase, and you'll see a paragraph 4.3.10, the gradual increase lasted in November 2021, and then obviously Omicron struck and the numbers went down in January. And the other thing we are expecting is that they will go up in 2022, and obviously we do expect a significant number of TENs to Queen's Jubilee celebrations this year. And you'll see a chart on the paragraph 4.3.12, which shows a sort of the TENs for 2019, 2020, 2021. So it just goes to show, apart from the pandemic, they have been fairly on average. Our environmental protection team also deal with construction noise, and there's 2 charts on page 28 which show the number of section 60 notices we serve to restrict hours of work. We also issue section 61 consents, which basically allows somebody allow a firm to operate, to undertake work outside the permitted hours for a very valid reason, such as somebody doing power floating or something like that work which needs to be finished on that day and can't continue. And obviously they're on the increase as well. You'll see the number of consents is actually significantly more than the number of notices. And apart from that, I don't have anything to say, but I'm happy to take any questions from members. I'm not sure if Councillor Virginia Thomas wishes to add anything or not.
Is he okay, Chair? Thanks very much, Jerry, for that, and to Councillor Porter for the opportunity to speak. I think the only thing that I just want to add is around the Noise Works, the app that was launched in January. I'm quite excited about it. It is this administration, one of the promises we make to Hackney residents is improving the noise reporting. And with this app, it would enable officers to work efficiently it will let our residents being able to log reports and reoccurrences directly into the noise work, and themselves, as Jerry mentioned, will be able to actually view view their complaint rather than waiting for an officer to call them back or wanting to call officer. So it will reduce, hopefully will reduce the number of complaints on the long run, and reduce numbers of members' inquiry about noise complaints, and reduction in recurrence reports as well, because this is quite a good reporting system. As Jerry mentioned, we were not very good with comms in Hackney. We are setting the pace in terms of using this app for noise reporting, because half of our ASB in Hackney is actually noise connected. Councillor Fluvier, sorry, I said Councillor Fluvier. Councillor Porter just disappeared on the screen. I hope she's still there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor, for John Thomas, and it's good to kind of know your views on the new system. I've just got to look to the chamber. So we've got Councillor Pluvier who's got a question. I'd like to invite her, and I've noticed Councillor Young and Councillor Root as well.
I'd like to ask Jerry about the Tenses. The demand in Hackney has been disproportionately high, which has the second highest number of TENS in London. So who are we second to? And is it nevertheless disproportionate? How do we know this?
Thank you, Councillor. It's Westminster. And this is from statistics that have been coordinated London-wide on the number of TENS in each borough.
So just to be clear, I think Westminster probably has more licensed premises than we do. Are we disproportionately high compared to a borough that has a similar number of licensed premises to us?
I can't answer that question now, but what I can do is find the answer out and get back to you on this. But I would say we get a disproportionate number of TENS.
I'm only raising it because you know you've put quite a lot in here about the demand of TENS, which is I think we've allocated an officer to that, and obviously if that's not enough, then Susan or whoever needs to assist with that. But I mean, you also make the point that the police raised objections to some TENSes, and that led to a decrease in the, I believe, a decrease in the number of applications. I mean, there are things we could be doing to reduce the number of TENSes if that was felt to be a good thing to do, but I'm not aware that they cause, outside of the problem to the service, that they do or don't cause significant issues in the borough.
No, I agree with you, but I would agree that they just cause a lot of work for the service as opposed to causing problems in the borough generally. And as I know you're aware that after earlier at the end of July onwards last year, the police did object to a lot of TENS, particularly in the nighttime economy area, which we've sort of moved on from now. We have done a huge amount of work with partnership with the police on the nighttime economy. We've got the Nighttime Economy Board, which is one of the boards that sits under Community Safety Partnership. And we have a weekly nighttime economy meeting with the police. So I think the work we're doing with the police on the nighttime economy is considerably more than we were ever doing in the past. And hopefully what we have done is sort of creating a list of problem premises and dealing with those between us.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pulevi has finished the line of questions now. So I'm going to go to Councillor Young. Would you like to ask your question, or make your comment.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Hello, so I've read the report. I'm not an expert in noise nuisance at all, but from my kind of fairly limited experience of ongoing noise casework, I'd just be really interested to hear how you deal with those longer term noise problems, how the team works, goes about working with people where you've got repeat reports again and again and again, because basically that noise is still there. So the first thing. And the second thing, particularly, so I've got a couple of cases where this is linked to planning issues. So I also wondered about how you work together with planning. So where the noise nuisance is linked to a planning breach, do the two teams work together to try and reach solutions, or is there a risk of things sort of either being bounced back and forth or falling between them?
Jerry?
Thank you for that, Councillor. In relation to difficult and ongoing noise cases, how we deal with those, if it's, for example, say it's a residential noise complaint, if I use that as an example. So we have principal enforcement officers who actually work on a ward basis. So they're actually very familiar with their wards. They each cover 2 wards. So your Woodbury Down and Suckbridge is your principal enforcement officer. So she would deal with all the cases in that ward. And what happens was, even if it's a housing case, if it comes to if it's reported for a second time, then it's passed to Community Safety and Enforcement, who will open an investigation on it, and they will deal with the ongoing cases. We don't always successfully deal with all cases, because one of the problems is poor sound insulation within properties and from different properties, and we're not able to deal with poor sound insulation. And the other thing as well is that people have in what I would call incompatible lifestyles, where, for example, you might have an older person on the ground floor, and you might have a young family with children on the first floor, and that causes problems as well. So there is a whole risk of things doing them. But as I said, the ward-based principal enforcement officer works very well for us, because then those officers, they know their ward very well, they know the problem cases, they deal with them. And as I say, we can't always deal with every case. We try to deal with them. Some of them were not successful, and we know that. And we explore every option to deal with them. And also we work very closely with the housing ASB team in dealing with residential noise as well, because the two are interlinked. And then in terms of commercial noise, we have environmental protection officers, and they're on a ward basis as well, and they deal with the commercial noise on a ward basis. And with regard to planning, yes, we meet with planning regularly. And if there's an enforcement issue, we meet with planning enforcement, discuss which is the best way of actually resolving that case, whether it's through planning or whether it's through environmental protection dealing with it as noise nuisance. So we meet and we discuss the best way forward. And it could be to deal with it as noise nuisance resolves the planning condition that's being breached.
Okay, so the couple of cases that I have in mind, I'm not asking you to advise on these cases, I'm kind of trying to extrapolate from that. The couple of cases I have in mind, one's in my ward actually, and one is not in my ward, but the ward councillors haven't been dealing with it. But they're actually, both of them are schools. So it's schools causing difficulty for residents. So would that be commercial or residential?
That would be commercial, councillor.
Right. And when you say resolve, like at what point do you close a case? If it definitely hasn't been solved, but there isn't a solution you can enforce right now, do you close the case or do you leave the case open? What's the what happens when you've got an ongoing problem, but we can't resolve it straight away?
We would close the case unless the person who is complaining provides evidence that there's something else which is affected and which wasn't previously investigated. So in terms, say there might be a restaurant which has commercial noise which we haven't been able to deal with. But if there was a problem with noisy refuse collections in the restaurant at 3 a.m, then of course we would deal with that aspect of the complaint.
Yeah. Okay. And do we do written reports in those circumstances? Would we have kind of evidence so that, if it comes back round again several years later, we've got a report somewhere?
Yes, we would have that information in our system, but obviously we don't have any information pre-October 2020 when we lost all that
course.
in the cyber attack.
Yeah.
But anything
Okay.
since then we have got.
Okay. And what's the longest that we ever hold a case open for? What's the longest period? I don't mean ever, but sort of from memory.
I suppose some could be up to 18 months. It depends. If we try and get the evidence, if sometimes officers take a hunch and say they may not be able to witness it, but their own view is that there is a definite problem, and then
Okay.
we would keep going until we try and get evidence. One of the things that we are open to is if, for example, the case we can't deal with it as a statutory nuisance, then we have powers under the Anti-Social Crime and Behaviour Act 2014, where we could issue community protection warning followed by community protection notice. But obviously, to issue community protection notice, you have then the antisocial behaviour has to be ongoing and persistent in nature. So you do need evidence of that as well. But you could issue community protection warning without it being persistent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that kind of good line of questioning. And I can also confirm that I'm aware that, you know, in cases that I've known of, not just in my own ward, that the enforcement, your team does follow through for quite some considerable time on cases to try and get a resolve that are quite complex. Okay, Councillor Root, you've been waiting patiently. Would you like to make your question or comment?
Well, it sort of follows on a little bit from that, really, because one of the things that I was quite excited about to see with the NoiseWorks system is on bullet point 4212. The last one says residents can view their cases within NoiseWorks, reducing their dependency on reliance on call the contact center or emailing teams to make updates, which I guess means that once they've got a case in the NoiseWorks system, they can log on and see if it's been updated and if there have been visits made and what have you, which I think is really positive, a really good thing. The one thing, though, that I did wonder how it would look, and of course, I went to have a look on the website at hackney.gov.uk/noise, and I could see how I would report a noise problem. But of course, I can't actually see what residents would see unless I make a noise complaint, which I didn't want to do because I thought my neighbours might not appreciate that. So I just wondered if it might be possible for you to supply us with some screenshots, basically, of what people can actually see. Because if we can understand as councillors what they are getting back, then we're in a much better position to be able to discuss with them if they raise issues with us. Do you see what I mean? So it'd just be really useful to see how this new noise system works, because it does sound as if it's quite positive to me. On a separate, different matter, I just wanted to say on the TENS issue, following on from what Councillor Pluvier was saying, I just wondered how easy it would be for you to compile, perhaps something like the top 10 London boroughs in terms of number of licensed premises and number of TENS applications that those boroughs are receiving in a given period, just so that we could have a real sort of proper indication of how things are sitting in Hackney compared to elsewhere. I think would be quite helpful if it's not too difficult to get that research. And the other thing I was wondering was, it does seem to me that the big problem that we have here is that we're not allowed to charge an appropriate fee for TENS licenses, but given how much it actually costs us to process them. And it does seem to me that maybe there's a case for a letter to lobby either, I don't know, would it be DCMS or would it be the Home Office? I'm not quite sure who deals with this, to ask for a review on the charge. Because obviously we're not going to be the only local authority that's out of pocket for this, but if we were able to, maybe we might be able to even write that letter as a committee. I don't know. It's just a question perhaps to the chair as much as it is to you, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Councillor. In response to your first question, yes, of course we can get screenshots, but obviously we'd have to anonymise any of the information from a resident. So that's the only caveat on that. But what I had intended to do even tonight, but it didn't work out, was to actually get someone from the team to do a presentation to you, but maybe that's something we'll do another time. So you can actually see how it works in practice. And totally agree with you regarding the top 10 boroughs of 10s. We can try and get that information and sort of do some comparison that I think would be really useful. And in relation to the letter, I know Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas had intended to write to the Home Office about that. That's one of the things that's on her list to do, about the actual cost of this compared to the cost it actually cost the council to sort of operate the system, for want of a better word. So all very valid and all would be taken into account.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know what Councillor Potter's view is about whether or not we could write as a committee that to perhaps back up what Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas is planning to say in her letter. You know, just basically to say that this is a problem that we're aware of as a wider authority, not just a cabinet member making a representation.
Councillor Root, can I just come through to Councillor Pluvier? She's just got a follow on.
I just want to point out that the problem with the TENS regime, and this is where we'll just get direct no way from the government, is that it's set up so that churches or street parties can apply cheaply to get a license for a temporary event, literally. And the reason that I raised the question, and it is, it's been going on for a long time, is that basically we allow this to happen in Hackney because we allow our nightclubs to regularly use their TENSes to extend effectively their licenses. And what we're not able to do is to negotiate with them extensions on certain days in return for not having temporary event notices. We don't have that. That isn't possible. But it actually, I did do it in one hearing. It's not legally bindable, but it seemed like a fair way of dealing with it. So we have this complicated situation where we have a lot of premises that are perhaps, I don't know whether other London authorities have more premises with later licenses than we do that don't need to have these temporary event notices. But it's a confusing system where the government will simply come back to us on a letter and say, oh, no, we don't want to charge honest vicars who want to have a special event a lot of money. But our situation is not that. Our situation is that it's our commercial venues that are using them to extend their licensing hours. And that's a different thing. And we actually need a different process, I believe. The whole thing needs reviewing. So it's not simply a write and say it's not covering the cost. It's not performing the same function, and it's getting that acknowledged as well. That's really important in our case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that, Councillor Pluvier. So do you think a useful action would be for me to follow up a conversation with Jerry and Councillor Fitzgerald Thomas in terms of, just some further thought on this process and what we can meaningfully ask. And obviously I'll have a further conversation with her about, the letter she is writing. But perhaps we can take some advice from you, Councillor Pluvier, as part of that in terms of your role as Chair of Licensing. Does that sound satisfactory, Councillor Root? And then we can have a further conversation about this, I think.
No, that sounds like a good idea.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that. Very useful. Anybody got any further questions or comments?
I just wanted to say what Councillor Pluvier said much more eloquently and knowledgeably, that as an applicant for attends for events in a church by a charity, I really think those should be distinguished from, bars and clubs applying for extended licenses under a system that ought to exist to extend their licenses. So Councillor Pluvier put it much better. So just to support that work going on, really.
I wonder, Jerry, whether you had any further thoughts or comments about how we could go about asking for the case to be distinguishable between the two application, applicants, types of applicants?
What I can do is speak to the licensing service and see if there is some way of distinguishing this, but also I think if we can get some idea of where we compare with, say, with the top 10 boroughs, that would help us as well. And I know Councillor Cluvier makes distinction. Do they have later licenses than we do in Hackney? And that's something to factor in as well. I think Haringey probably has later licenses than we do in Hackney.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay. Have members got any other further comments or thoughts? I obviously noticed that noise is still loud music is still very considerable in terms of the major noise complaint in both commercial and residential. I did slightly wonder, you did talk about how the new system has been readily received. Do you think we are going to stay with this system? Because I'm slightly worried when the council keeps changing its reporting mechanisms for residents, and it can be quite hard for residents to keep track of those changes. And is this something that we're quite sure of now and we think we're going to stick with?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think we will change. What we will need to do is enhance it based on feedback from service users and officers to make the system ongoing improvements and make the system better.
Okay.
And there isn't any intention to change it at the moment. It's only just been launched, and the intention is to keep that for as long as we can.
Any further comments at all, members? Well, this report is just for noting, isn't it? So can we agree that the report is for noting? Yeah.
Noted.
No, thank you. You are welcome to leave. I'd just like to say that Jerry has attended this meeting as part of his annual leave, so I think we can appreciate the additional time that he's putting in, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your time off, Jerry. Bye-bye. Okay, so moving on, can we go to agenda item 5, which is the draft work programme for 2022-23, and that's on page it's at the back of the agenda pack anyway. Can I just point out, we were due to have the deferred planning monitoring report tonight, but that has had to be put back because of the difficulty with some of the data gathering as a result of the cyber attack. We had hoped for that to be heard in June, but it's now been decided that both the planning monitoring reports for 2021 and 21-22 will be heard at the same corporate committee in December. Anybody else got any other comments about the work programme at all? I hope, since we're getting a bit more back to normal, that we should have our usual reports as timetabled, and we won't suffer from the kind of delays which have been understandable this last municipal year. Okay, is everybody in agreement with the work programme?
Yeah.
So moving on to agenda item 6, any other urgent business? I haven't had any notification. Okay, there being, oh, sorry, I would just like to say, I noticed you joined Councillor Chohan, so I just wanted to welcome Councillor Chohan, who joined during the last item. Okay.
Can I, before you close the meeting, can I ask something formally? My name is not on the agenda pack as a member of the committee, and in January I said, oh, am I really a member of this committee, and was told, no, you're not, you don't have to come. So this time I said, am I a member of this committee, and was told, yes, you are, because you're a member of planning. Could I make sure that I'm officially on the list, or not on the list, but on the list would be good.
Yes,
So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so apart from that urgent